All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for some Week 1 games, Thursday and Friday slate. There's timestamps below if you guys would like to skip around. These are the games that will be taking place on September 1st and 2nd before the first Saturday of the college football season. Looking on Thursday, Central Michigan, they head to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State, 21-point line in favor of the Cowboys. CMU won the last matchup back in 2016 on that crazy Hail Mary play that they had. Central Michigan's offense, Lou Nichols, led the nation in yards by over 200 on the ground, 1,848 yards rushing, 16 touchdowns. He was the only running back in college football with 300-plus carries. He had 341 of them. He was a complete workhorse for the Chippewas. Quarterback Daniel Richardson, he's a third-year freshman. He was a third-year freshman himself last season, 2,583 yards through the air. A nice 24-6 TD to INT ratio. Only completed 60% of his balls, but this was a great balanced offense, 261 passing yards per game to, blend in with Lou Nichols, who was just so dominant on the ground. They lose two of their top four pass catchers, but Dallas Dixon's back. He had 45 grabs, 700-plus yards. And then Joel Wilson, 31 for 367 at tight end. 32 points per game. The biggest issue is they replaced two bookend tackles to the NFL. And, they now face the nation's top pass rush from a season ago. It only gets better with the turn of Trace Ford, mixed in with Brock Martin, Colin Oliver, and Tyler Lacey. I'm concerned with how the linebackers will play for Oklahoma State, though, because they replaced two starters there, and now Xavier Benson from Texas Tech, and then Mason Cobb, and, whoever else defends the run here at linebacker. I think this is why it's an important game for Oklahoma State. They're favored by 3 scores. They're facing a good team from a season ago, but they're facing a tough running attack. Derek Mason comes over, and he's going to stick with the same scheme, I assume, from last year. So this is an interesting game for this defense because the linebackers are really going to be tested. And I think that's going to be one of the Achilles heels this year. Are they going to get the same amount of pass rush out of them? Is that what Mason's going to want to do? Are they going to be able to slow down the run? So that's one thing I'm really interested in seeing in this game. The Central Michigan defense wasn't spectacular by any means last year, 26 points per game allowed, and they lose key contributors at all 3 levels. Good depth on the D-line, though. Aquan Johnson, Jaquise Bristol. These guys only allowed 18 rushing yards over their final 2 games. That's elite work. Face this pistol set. They'll give Dominic Richardson the keys at running back. Sanders on the edge is something to watch. That's when he's his best, is when he's out of the pocket on the run, either throwing or making plays with his leg to pick up some yards or the first down, or potentially even find the end zone with his leg. So I think that's one thing that's key to watch here for Central Michigan. They do have 2 respectable corners in Dante Kent, who had 14 pass breakups, and Olani Stuckey. He's on the opposite side. 2 veterans at corner. But Central Michigan only had 5 interceptions last year as a team. They were ranked 112th against the pass. They now face the speed and athleticism of Oklahoma State, mainly Brendan Presley, who's the headliner. Who else will Sanders give a chance still to make plays? 5 of the top 8 wide receivers were freshmen a season ago. So we're really going to see who can separate themselves here. Jaden Bray, John Paul Richardson, Rashad Owens. You'll see who's going to step up here at receiver for Oklahoma State. I think CMU can hang in there. Slight cover. Plenty to watch in this game. I just think that Oklahoma State, the pass rush is going to be too much for the Chippewas, and I think they're going to have some success through the air against this secondary of CMU. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting game, a lot to look forward to, mainly those linebacking play. Like I said, 34-14 for me, Oklahoma State over Central Michigan. Looking at Pitt in West Virginia, the Backyard Brawl is back, 7 p.m. on ESPN, 7-point line in favor of the Panthers. Keaton Slovis comes over from USC, and I think he should have a big year. Frank Cignetti now as quarterback coach. He did not progress very well under Graham Harrell last season, who he'll actually be facing in this one. JT Daniels transfers over to West Virginia, so a rematch of the former USC quarterbacks. Jarrett Wayne at wide receiver and tight end Gavin Barfamello are only productive returnees here at pass catcher. They had Bud Means and Keonta Mumfield. Interesting to see who steps up at pass catcher here in this game and throughout the year. They face a young WV secondary. I like Charles Woods. He was one of the more underrated players for them. He's leading this group. Pretty tough challenge here. This was a great passing attack from last year. Slovis is the almost ideal replacement for Kenny Pickett. 150 rushing yards per game, not bad for how much they threw the ball. So they had that ideal balance on offense. The 42nd ranked run defense of West Virginia, though, led by Dante Stillis from a season ago, who can really wreak havoc in the middle. He's joined by Jordan Jefferson, who's 6'3", 310. They're joined by Mike Lockhart, who's 317 pounds. So it's a tough matchup for an O-line that really wasn't great last year. But they get 5 starters back. WVU is quite deep at linebacker. They made some adds in the portal. For the Mountaineer offense, though, of course, JT Daniels, he has Bryce Ford-Wheaton, Sam James coming back to work with. They did lose 4 wide receivers in the portal, so the lack of experience might come in to plague them here. But it's a deep backfield. Justin Johnson, Tony Mathis Jr., a nice 1-2 punch there. Center Zach Frazier should be a great player this year. And the offensive line as a whole, they get 5 starters back, but a very tough ask here. They face one of the nation's top defensive lines, Kalijah Cansey, Hoaduk, Bonato, and John Morgan. Pitt just lives in the backfield. Those are the three notables, really. They got more players than that will step up for him. They aren't overloaded of size, just great power and skill from this Pitt defensive line. Servassier Dennis coming off the edge as well. That's a lot of firepower the Panthers have in this front seven. WVU definitely has the size on the interior line to win. Doug Nestor, for example, 6'7", 320. And the tallest defensive lineman for Pittsburgh is 6'2". Pitt's secondary was awful last year. I think Pat Narduzzi, he's just not going to settle for. Playmaking wasn't lacking, though. They had 16 picks, and Brandon Hill was great. Only lose one starter. They added no transfers. So Narduzzi's confident in this group because, last year they really struggled with the loss of DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford from 2020. I think this back end is going to look to make a statement in this game, and I think they're going to record a few big plays off the heels of a great defensive line effort. I do think WVU will have their stints of success with that size edge, but Pitt 30-21 for me. Looking at Penn PM Eastern time on Fox, this is a big-time game. Penn State goes on the road to West Lafayette, but they are the 3-point favorites. Penn State really struggled to run the ball. It was a one-dimensional unit most of last year. Sean Clifford, his fifth year back, 8,600 yards, 72 touchdowns in his career. Quietly had a good year in Mike Yurchich's first season. They were giving Iowa fits until he got hurt. Remember that game from early on in last season. They made some good pinpoint throws, made good decisions throughout the season. Overall, good year, but the story's been the same his entire career. Just inconsistencies and accuracy struggles. His ceiling kind of seems maxed out, but again, another year in Yurchich's system could really be his benefit. And he has a good group of pass catchers to work with this year. Mitchell Tinsley, Parker Washington, Keandre Lambert-Smith. Tinsley, 1,400-yard receiver from Western Kentucky a season ago. Washington is dynamic in the slot. And Lambert-Smith, he's a big play waiting to happen as well. So I like what they got there, that trio. And the Purdue secondary was solid last year, the 34th ranked pass defense. They did give up nearly 400 yards and 5 touchdowns each to the better passing attacks of Ohio State and Tennessee. 2 starters are gone, but they do get back 3 very important veterans. Cam Allen, he had 65 tackles last year. Jamari Brown, 7 plays on the ball. And then a fifth-year senior in Corey Trice. So these guys are certainly going to look to be up to the challenge at home. Penn State, that running game I was talking about, 108 rushing yards per game. It's not good. It was one of the nation's worst marks. Kevontae Lee, he's a bruiser at 239 pounds, though. Averaged nearly 5 yards per carry, 530 yards. Some solid work as a pass catcher as well. Divine Ford, he's back as well. A veteran in Ford mixed in with a 5-star Nicholas Singleton. He's the player we're all eyeing this year. So the backfield's not as deep as it used to be, but they still have 3 very good options here. Singleton, he has a lot of upside to him. So he might not get involved much in this game from a long-term standpoint, though. He's definitely a guy they're going to look to use a lot. Purdue's defense, Crichton Jenkins, 35 tackles, 8 TFL a season ago. Pairs up with a solid duo of defensive tackles in Branson Dean and Lawrence Johnson. The lack of pass rush is going to be a big factor. They had 2 sacks per game last year, which is a big bump up from 2 seasons ago. They lose George Karlaftis, though, and he was the tone setter for this pass rush. Overall, it was a good unit for Purdue a season ago. Again, they did struggle against those better offenses, but for the most part, this was a very good defense that really led the way for them. Penn State's defense, P.J. Mustipher, Curtis Jacobs, only notable return, he's in the front 7. Brent Pry, of course, is gone. They should have no issue stopping the run here. Purdue doesn't run the ball that much. King Duru is a pretty solid back, but this is an air raid attack that's going to want to win through the air, meaning Aiden O'Connell and his stacked group of pass catchers will have to face this tough secondary, and that's the difference maker in this game. Top wide receiver Milton Wright, he's suspended for the year, but I'm not too worried about it because Payne Durham at tight end, he's a tough matchup up the seam. He does a lot for them. They pick up 2 Iowa transfers in Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy. It's kind of funny because he absolutely tore up Iowa, and then those guys in a losing effort on the other sideline decided to join him, a few months later. Pretty interesting. Brock Thompson, though, he was a deep threat. And then TJ Sheffield is a good producer. Mershawn Rice as well. He didn't do a lot last year, but this is a deep group of pass catchers. This air raid's certainly going to thrive this year, but I think Jair Brown coming off a breakout year. He had 6 picks, 5 pass breakups, 74 tackles. Joey Porter over there on the other side at corner. Keaton Ellis, a senior, at safety. Zakee Wheatley will push him for the starting spot. I really want to see who gets more playing time, Ellis or Wheatley there in this ball game. Daquan Hardy, he had 7 recorded plays on the ball. Kalen King, he burned his red shirt because they didn't want to keep him off the field. This is a really impressive defensive back group. I'll take Penn State's secondary to reign supreme here, but Manny Diaz at Miami, we had some really iffy defensive contests. I think now that he has less pressure, no longer being the head coach at Miami, he's going to be the DC here. I think he'll be able to kind of get back to his own element here, and I do think he'll have called a very good defense come this ball game. Lack of pass rush from Purdue, I think will give Clifford to make chances. Will give Clifford a chance to make plays downfield. Neither team will do much on the ground, I don't believe, but I do think Penn State wins this one, 27-21. A lower scoring contest. Could see even lower than that. I think Penn State wins this one on the road, but this is going to be a very tough challenge. I just think the secondary of Penn State will be the difference maker against an air raid attack that's got plenty of weapons and a really good quarterback. Some of the other Thursday notables: Ball State travels to take on number 17 Tennessee. We'll get to see Hendon Hooker and Josh Heupel's squad in action. South Carolina State takes on UCF, a very dynamic running game. John Ross Plumlee just named the starter. Isaiah Bowser, Johnny Richardson. Very excited to see what those guys do. LA Tech and Missouri. New Mexico State at Minnesota. Minnesota, a very poor non-conference schedule to get things started the first 3 weeks. They might not allow a single point. This should be an easy contest for them. I believe the spread's about 37.5. Northern Arizona takes on Arizona State, so we'll get a chance to see Emory Jones in action as well to cap off a pretty interesting first Thursday night in college football. Kicking things off on Friday, Western Michigan travels to take on Michigan State, who leads the series all-time 14-2. I believe they've won 12 in a row, and they have a 19-point spread here in this one. Western Michigan loses a lot on offense, but they do return top-notch running game led by Sean Tyler and Ladarius Jefferson. 214 rushing yards per game, 14th in college football with that mark. Tyler's a smaller, more quicker back. Jefferson, he's about 230 pounds, so he's a bigger guy. They got a nice little 1-2 punch there. Facing the nation's worst pass defense from last year, that part of the offense is depleted for Western Michigan, though. They lose multiple pass catchers. Caleb Ellaby at quarterback. Corey Crooms was a good producer for them last season, a wide receiver, and he's a notable coming back, but the continuity's not there one bit with this passing attack as they lose everybody. Jalen Hall transfers out. Sky Moore goes to the NFL. Xavier Henderson, he's at safety. He's back with all the starters from last year, and they also add Amir Speed from Georgia. Tucker's fully committed to revamping this back end. They don't. They added. I believe he's the only transfer they added this year. They're going to rock with guys like Chester Kimbrough to get things done. And they were just so bad last year, dead last in college football against the pass. They really need this back end to step up so they can complement a good front seven led by Jacob Slade, along with Maverick Hansen and Jalen Hunt, who's 6'4", 320. These guys are really good at stopping the run. That was one of their strong suits last year. There was not many times where they struggled on the ground. Cal Halliday, along with a few transfers in Jacoby Wyndham and Aaron Brewer at linebacker. Interested to see who gets the nod there because they have a lot of talent at linebacker. He continues to do wonders as Mel Tucker in the portal, especially here on the defensive side of the ball. I do think that Western Michigan will just be stonewalled on offense, but downfield the secondary is certainly suspect for MSU. Looking at Western Michigan's defense, Dorian Jackson and Corey Moment, they're pretty good players at corner and linebacker respectively. The run defense wasn't awful in MAC play, but they were brutal in the last two regular season games. They got absolutely swamped. They got smoked by Michigan in Week 1 when they played a Power 5 opponent. I think Jalen Berger and Jarrett Broussard will have a field day here. A stagnant night for the Western Michigan offense. That's why I have Michigan State cruising to a 38-14 win. I think they could certainly score more than that, but I think Western Michigan's a good team, and I think they're going to show up and play tough. 38-14 is the score for me. They'll cover in this game. Pretty good effort, though, from both sides. And Michigan State, I believe they win 10 games this season. That's going to be a good start to that. Virginia Tech travels to Norfolk to take on Old Dominion. They're 8.5-point favorites. It's a pretty low number according to most people, but they don't understand how good Old Dominion was late in the year last season. Virginia Tech, they do have Grant Wells coming over from Marshall. He's shown good abilities as a downfield passer. Biggest problems, 22 picks in 23 career games, protecting the ball. Something he needs to focus on now that he enters the Power 5 ranks. Caleb Smith, the wide receiver, great speed. He's going to be joined by Jaden Blue, great productive slot option from Temple. Mix that in with a solid group of backs and Malachi Thomas, who was an unsung hero last year, really came on in the second half of the season, showcasing nice speed, good vision. He's a hard worker as well. I think with some more power and durability added this offseason, he should really develop well. Jalen Holstein, he might get used there as a bigger back. Joe Rudolph, he's the offensive line coach now, but he comes from a long line of great runners. He was the run game coordinator at Wisconsin for a number of seasons, so I am very excited for this backfield this season, Thomas especially. The offensive line, they replaced 3 starters. Parker Clemens expected to be a draft prospect, though. I think that he's going to really lead the charge in the trenches for them. Old Dominion, their run defense was quite good last season. 134 yards per game allowed on the ground. They get back a lot of veterans now at this point. Jason Henderson, a linebacker, 79 tackles as a freshman. Ryan Henry had 75 stops. Marquise Haynes is probably their best defensive end. A few freshmen that got involved on the D-line, they're all back. I think they might really progress more this season. That's why this could be a tough challenge. It's a well-put-together offense as well for ODU. Hayden Wolf, 194 through the air per game, 10-7 TD to pick ratio. And it's not great, but it was a young quarterback last year, and they mixed him in with DJ Mack, who's still there for some short yardage pickups. He's very good on the ground, a much bigger quarterback. 161 yards per game on the ground. The top 2 rushers are back for ODU. Blake Watson, he had 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, 100-plus yards per contest for him. And then Elijah Davis had 569 and 6 scores. They have 4 starters back on the O-line, so I think this offense is really going to progress nicely because I think they're going to have much more balance this season. They also get Eli Jennings back at wide receiver, former West Virginia transfer at 1,000-plus yards a season ago, and Zach Kuntz at tight end, 72 grabs and 692 yards, so had 5 touchdowns. And Isaiah Page, for what it's worth, he was third in receiving yards and receptions and yards last season. So they got experience all around in this offense. I think that's the biggest reason why people are expecting ODU to potentially cover in this game because Virginia Tech really struggled to stop the run last year. They were 91st in college football in that category, allowed 4.5 yards per carry. Really young unit, though. They do lose 2 names in the front 7, Jordan Williams and Amari Barno. That's all I can really think of, though. Tyjon Garbutt is back, 30 tackles, 6 TFL. Was more of a hybrid player for them. Some rising juniors and Mario Kendricks and Norrell Powell at defensive tackle. I expect this defensive line group to really take some big strides this year. I think Brent Pry is really going to allow this front 7 to thrive this year, and they have a stellar secondary behind them as well. But Dax Holyfield, Alan Tisdale, some veterans at 80-plus tackles each last season. I think this run defense as a whole is really going to take some strides, and they're really going to showcase it in this game with not an easy task by Old Dominion having those starters back and those guys in the backfield. The big 3 in the secondary, though, safety Shamari Connor, cornerback Dorian Strong, and another safety Nazir Peoples, who's a very good box safety, can get down the hill in a hurry. He's a big-time asset against the run. Strong, he's got good length, some good ball skills. It seems like a harder game to predict, but the passing defense for ODU was not good last year. I think VT has the playmakers to win downfield. Last year, Grant Wells was in Charles Huff's offense, and they threw the ball a lot, so he's certainly acclimated to take teams down with his arm. I think ODU's running game with those 4 starters in the O-line is intriguing, but Pry, I think he's going to kind of scheme things out to slow it down here. I think it's a big size edge for Virginia Tech's offensive line compared to the ODU D-line, but the depth gives them a good chance because they had a lot of freshmen last year who got involved. I do think the balance for Virginia Tech and some big plays on defense in the back end will be the difference maker. I'm going to go 35-17, pretty good cover. You could probably even see Virginia winning by more points than that, rather. Old Dominion, though, not a bad team one bit. I just think here they're outmatched in the trenches, and that's going to be the difference, as the balance for Virginia Tech will be too much to overcome. Looking at the nightcap, TCU and Colorado, I do have the Buffaloes going 0-12 this year, but a solid chance here to win at home, as both defenses were awful last season. Sonny Dykes takes over a nice group on offense for TCU. Max Duggan, a dual-threat gamer with weapons all around. I've been very impressed with Duggan. He's never really progressed over the last 3 years. This guy plays hard. He makes plays with his arms, with his legs. He does everything for this football team at times. I do like what they have at running back. Amario DeMarcolato, 446 yards and 4 scores, mixed in with Keandre Miller at 623 yards and 7 touchdowns on 83 carries, 7.5 yards per touch. Get back to top 3 pass catchers in Darius Davis, Tay Barber, and Quentin Johnson, who might be a first or second round draft pick come next April, 6'4", 210. A very good skill set. He can do a variety of things there. TCU, though, they were 119th in total defense. They also really struggled against the run. Ramon Jefferson, Sam Houston State transfer addition, one of the only big moves they made in the offseason. He's ridiculously elusive. He can stop on a dime. He can really cut well, impressive speed. He's going to be paired up with Alex Fortnott, who's he's a veteran at this point. I think he's going to have a big night. Jefferson's really going to impress this season. One of the lone bright spots for Colorado. They do have one of the Pac-12's worst offensive lines. They couldn't pass block last year. Of course, the passing game didn't really help them out in many ways. They couldn't get any breathing room going on the ground, though. Offense was just completely terrible. They do add Tommy Brown at right tackle from Alabama, 6'7", 330. That's amazing size, mixed in with what is a very young offensive line as a whole. Secondary for TCU seems to have a big edge. Colorado could not pass the ball well at all last year. And they were almost down there with the same numbers as an Air Force. That team that's triple option attack. So that was pretty embarrassing for Colorado last year. Brendan Lewis disappointed, even with JT Shrout, the Tennessee transfer, getting the potential start. There's a lot of work to do here. I do like RJ Sneed coming over from Baylor. It's a great add. And Brady Russell, he's a player I like at tight end. But overall, I don't expect much from this passing game, at least in week 1. Maybe throughout the year they'll grow. And they should definitely be better than last year because that was just terrible. They can't really be worse than they were last season. But they do face this tough secondary of Travaius Hodges, Tomlinson, and Noah Daniels at corner. They also picked up safety Mark Perry from Colorado. His first game will come against his former Boulder teammate. Linebacker D. Winter is a good sideline tackler, but linebackers struggled to generate playmaking last year. Run defense was horrid, and they add numerous transfers and freshmen who are 300-plus pounds on that defensive line, so they should start to take some shape here in the trenches. But I think in this game, Ramon Jefferson, he's going to have a big day. I do think they'll need some yards after catch from their pass catchers, and I believe they'll get a little bit of that. But defensively for Colorado, they were just flat out awful last year despite having good individual players at all levels. They had 3 great defensive backs transfer out of the program who were, really good for them. But they do get Isaiah Lewis back. He's one of the top safeties in the conference. Only 12 sacks a season ago. for the Buffaloes. Underneath coverage was rubbish, and they, of course, lose those starters in the back end and a handful on the D-line and at linebacker as well. A lot of points in this one. Much more for TCU, though. Sonny Dykes looking to make a statement early. I think they're really going to have their way here in this one. But Colorado will score, so I'm going to take the over. I believe it's about 55 in this one. Both the defenses were just flat out awful last year. So 45-24 for me. TCU will get the job done. They'll have a lot of balance, a lot of big-time stat sheet players for them. And looking at some of the other notables on Friday, William and Mary and Charlotte, they'll be playing their second game of the year. Temple gets things started with Duke. Kansas hosts Tennessee Tech. And then Illinois and Indiana. Illinois, they play in week 0 as well, and they'll turn around and play the Hoosiers on a Friday night at 8 p.m. So that's going to wrap everything up for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.